Hearing will come to order. Gentlemen, we appreciate you all being here. You're old friends to this committee and to this town and to your country, and we appreciate your service. I have a written statement that I actually was looking forward to delivering with great gusto, but I think I'll pass on that. I'm not sure exactly what our voting schedule is, and we may try to get your opening statements in at least if we were to have some votes. But we should have plenty of time this afternoon to do the kind of discussion we want to have. Mr. Nake and I decided back in end of June, early July, that we wanted to do a series of hearings on the way forward in Iraq. And after having done 4 of those hearings back in July, it occurred to me over the break that it once again was timely to do that. The one thing that you can predict about wars is that they're unpredictable. The situation changes, and we want to hear your all's opinions. Some of we've heard from before, and some we have not, and we look forward to that discussion today. There's no question that presidential election years are not necessarily the best time to discuss the nuances of significant issues, but obviously the situation in Iraq is of absolute importance to this country and our national security, and those kinds of discussions that get into the details of national security policies must occur. And with that, I'd like to hear any comments Mr. Aiken would like to make, and then I'll introduce our panel.
Thank you, Dr. Schneider, and welcome again to our witnesses. It's a nice situation to be in. Here we were a year ago, and everybody was very pessimistic. We had solicited testimony from every expert or not expert in Washington, or in I don't know how many 100 miles around, and we got some kind of interesting ideas. We were looking for ideas, but it was a sort of a generally pessimistic sense as to what we could do in Iraq. And some of you, of course, were not part of that pessimism, but by and large it was. And now a year later, we've seen a turnaround that's probably more significant than anybody would have even dared to hope for, hardly. And yet, in spite of that, there are continuing challenges, and there's ways that we should be taking advantage of the good situation to try and improve it even more. So I hope that your testimony will focus on the additional steps that we can take and how we can improve. General Keane particularly, we thank you as a voice of encouragement last year, and maybe be more encouraging this year. I hope you're not discouraging anyway, but we think that things have gone very well, and are very interested in now where do we go and how do we continue. Thank you all for joining us, and I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, your scheduling set of hearings. I think that we've had some very interesting subjects, and this is another good one.
Without objection, any formal opening statement by Mr. Aiken and myself will be made a part of the record. Any written statement you provided the committee will also be made a part of the record. We're pleased to have with us today General Jack Keane, retired Army, former Vice Chief and Acting Chief of Staff of the Army, retired General Barry McCaffrey, who's now the President of B.R. McCaffrey Associates, Dr. John Hamre, President and CEO of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and Mr. Christopher Kojm, the Director of the U.S. Foreign Policy Summer Institute, the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University. What I think we will do is we will begin with General Keane, then go to General McCaffrey, then Dr. Hamre. Oh, Dr. Hamre first. Dr. Hamre, we're going to go with you first, and I guess we'll just march down the line then.
You'll mention.
We have some votes that will hit us at some point, but we may be able to get your all's formal opening statements in and even get us some questions. We'll just, as you know, it's unpredictable. We will start with you, Dr. Hamre.
Okay.
And we will put the clock on for 5 minutes, but it's not a hard 5 for you all. Just to give you an idea where you are, and if you're still going strong, keep going.
We'll easily make it for that. I think I get to go first because I'm the heaviest physically, and so I appreciate that. Thank you for inviting me to come back, and especially to join my colleagues. These are men that I've worked with and admired for a very long time, and it's a real privilege to be with them and, of course, to appear before you. I think I was asked to come because I was involved with, and CSIS was involved with, the Jones Commission. We were asked by the Congress to send retired military officers and police chiefs to Iraq to assess the capability of the Iraqi security forces. And we were there during the summer. came back and reported to the full Armed Services Committee in September. And I will say I have not been back since then. So my observations are constrained by the personal experiences I had at that time, but I have stayed in touch with people who are there, friends who are there, and other delegations that have gone. So I may be able to offer a bit of help to the commission today, or to the committee today. Let me just summarize what we said in the commission report, just very briefly. First, we said there was real progress. We could see real progress at the time. It certainly has picked up enormously since we were there, but there was genuine progress on the ground, especially in Anbar province. You could see it. Second, we saw there were no shortage of Iraqis who were prepared to join the army or the police forces. People were not a problem. It was really getting them trained and getting a leadership cadre was the challenge. And we went around and saw the training establishments, and I must say I was impressed. I thought we saw genuine command leadership credibility among the trainers, and these were Iraqis. So that was good. It was still in the startup phase, but it was positive. We thought that, the Iraqis, I should say, were confident that they could take greater control of their security. The defense minister told us flat out, we can take care of internal security by next summer. Now, yesterday or the day before, he's revised that. He's shifted that date back, and he's now saying 2012. Our people felt he was a little optimistic last summer. But nonetheless, there was a genuine sense that they can do more, and we ought to let them do more. And I'll come to that in just a moment. We saw the training of the police, and we saw the police establishment. There are 4 different, police elements in the country. The provincial police, that's the bulk of the police. There are national police, a small cadre, really a paramilitary force, largely in Baghdad. There are border police, and then there are kind of traffic, highway patrol type police. The ones that really matter for purposes here, it's the provincial police and it's the national police. We judged at that time that there was genuine progress on the provincial police, and we saw the training for them. Uneven leadership, where there was good leadership, they did well. Where there was weak leadership, they didn't do well, but it was starting to get better. National police was a problem, frankly, and we said in our report that we thought they were beyond real repair, that they needed to be disestablished and rebuilt in a different direction. Now, the Iraqi government really hotly protested that. They disagreed with us sharply. They were quite deeply riven by sectarian elements, very much seen as being a Shia force, and we didn't feel would be productive. We gave recommendations on how they could be retooled, use them in a different capacity than their current capacity. Sixth, we said that the Interior Ministry was a major problem. The Interior Ministry was dysfunctional, and now again, this is a hotly disputed finding on our part, and the Iraqi government claims quite to the contrary, that it is not. But I think there still are serious problems in the Interior Ministry that we need to tackle. Seventh, we concluded that the Iraqis could do more if we would let them do more. I noticed a very interesting phenomena when I talked to, field grade officers, majors, lieutenant colonel, majors and captains, lieutenant colonels, and said, what's your view? I heard the same all the time, they could do more if we'd let them. Usually, general officers said they're going to take a long time. But field grade officers that were close to them said they could do more. And I think it was our view they could do more. Indeed, if we do it for them, they'll let us. If we insist that they do more of it, they will stand up. And things they want to do, they do. I mean, they're able, for example, they make payroll every 2 weeks. And it's not a pretty process, but they get it done. And so it was our view that they could be more effective and could do more if we let them to do it. Eighth, we concluded that there was no progress on political reconciliation. Now, this was in September. And I think that still is a major problem. Now, we've shifted our concept. We spent 4 years trying to create a central government and then have that government reach out and provide control over the country. That hasn't worked. What we've been doing during the last year is to build security up from the ground level and the provincial level, and that is working. But what happens if you build that competency at the ground level and you're not able to build a central government that has credibility and authority? We'll be in trouble. So now let me just very briefly say with that as a threshold, what can I offer to the committee now? Certainly the surge has contributed to a much better environment. But it's not just the surge. I mean, I think there are two other factors which we don't appreciate. One is we've put 100,000 more cops and Army Iraqis, out on the beat. And that's made a big difference. And they've become more competent and a better force. So I think that's a major factor. And the second factor is we have basically recognized the Sunni militia as a de facto police force. And that's something we had resisted for a long time. So there was a lot more Iraqi security presence on the ground at the same time we were doing the surge. Now, the surge, it was a good idea, and we created a security concept that worked. So I think, but we have to say, now that's the starting point for, I think, the success that we can register this year. I think we can pull troops out this year. I think the plan we're on can work. I think we will build up enough Iraqi capabilities so that it will compensate for us being able to pull out probably 5,000 a month. I think that that's a path that we can and we should stay on. We should put more of the burden on the Iraqis for this security. And then finally, the economy is still a great problem. Huge amount of unemployment in Iraq. And of course, the security situation has been a major factor for that. Hopefully, greater security will provide more economic opportunity. And you see it in the north. You see it in Kurdistan. Things are really moving remarkably better. It's starting to pick up in the south, starting to pick up. So boosting the economy will be an enormous thing that we can do. And frankly, our efforts have not been very effective, partly because of the security and partly because we didn't have very coherent plans. And then finally, let me say, we do need to find a way to encourage greater responsibility by the Iraqis. We have to give them and lead them to taking a larger role, and I think that's in part our pulling back and part of what we have to do during the year. Let me stop and turn to my colleague. Thank you.
General Keane.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to participate again in discussions about Iraq. I'm honored to do that with my colleagues at the table, particularly Secretary Hamre and General McCaffrey, both of whom I've worked with and known for years and I just have tremendous regard for. If I could indulge you, I've got 10 minutes of statement here, and I'll get to it. A year ago this month, the President announced what was a very unpopular decision based on a harsh reality, that the strategy in Iraq had failed, that Iraq was spinning out of control with an ever-increasing level of violence, that a new government less than a year old was about to be fractured, that the consequences of failure in Iraq were unacceptable, and that the only course of action was to conduct a counteroffensive, soon to be called surge, and that action remained the only viable action to gain security as a necessary precondition for political and economic progress. As such, the military strategy was changed to use proven counterinsurgency practices, which means protect the people where they live, and a new team, General David Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker, will put in place to implement it. Troops began arriving the next month in February, and they completed their deployment in June. After all the troops were in place, the violence began to go down, so much so that it has fallen dramatically, over 60% in all major categories. This is a stunning achievement, and credit to General Petraeus and General Odierno and their magnificent troops. To those who say, well, of course, you add more troops, particularly American troops, the violence will go down. That misses the essential point. We had surged 3 times before, albeit with less troops, with no long-term success. It is a combination of proven counterinsurgency practices, in other words, a new strategy, yes, more troops, and also brilliant leadership, which has made the difference. We have never, ever before taken on defeating the counterinsurgency directly. In the past, we had left that up to the Iraqis to do, and that's why the change of mission and the strategy is so critical to success. General Petraeus asked me to look at the situation in February as the troops were arriving. I did, and I did a number of times after that. But back in February, I confirmed that my analysis, something I had already known, that we really needed 8 brigades to surge, not 5, but they were not available. So how these troops were used is also very dramatic. The leaders' intellectual flexibility and tactical agility maximized the troops we had and made the sum much greater than the parts. This is a remarkably successful military campaign which has broken all of the previous paradigms of counterinsurgency. And regardless of what we view here, this will be studied for years, in my view. A little over 6 months after the surge forces were complete, the Iraqis passed a major piece of legislation last Saturday, the de-Baathification law. It's actually the Justice and Accountability Law, but I think for our edification, that's the proper term. Despite our impatience and the many frustrations with the Iraqi political system, in this new fledgling political culture, this is a remarkable achievement in such a short period of time for them. More must be done. It will be challenging, but I am convinced more will be done. The Iraqis are already proving their willingness to change. They have implemented the following without codifying it in law because the executive branch knew how important it is. 1, sharing oil revenues with the provinces. 2, purging sectarian extremists from positions of authority. 3 is hiring Sunni volunteers for security forces and also in the civilian ministries. And 4, making major improvements in the legal and justice system. Eventually, these will be codified into national legislation, just as the de-Baathification law did, but they deserve the credit for implementing it beforehand. With the dramatic improvement in security and the beginning of real political and economic progress, where do we go from here? May I suggest at the outset that the alternative strategy in Iraq is already in place, it's operating, and it is succeeding. I've got 10 short points to make. 1, security. We must sustain and build on the gains that we've made. We're taking out 25% of our combat forces this year based on the stress and strain that's on the military, the Marines and the Army to be specific, and General Petraeus and General Odierno's empathy of that situation. And they've looked at it and they've determined that it is an acceptable risk. That will be completed in July. The fact is that no one knows, to include General Petraeus or General Odierno, what the impact of a 25% force reduction will be. But we are going to find out eventually. Therefore, in my view, we should make a realistic assessment after we complete that reduction in July and determine the consequences of that. And I think that would take 4 to 6 months for us to be able to do that accurately. To those who say we should reduce further beyond the 25% because of our success or because of our frustration with the length of involvement, my response to that, it's an unacceptable risk. We should not squander the gains that we've made. To do that is a repeat of past failures where we planned for unrealistic reduction based on what? Our underestimation of the enemy, and secondly, our overestimation of the Iraqi security forces capacity level. We have been there before, and it has not worked. When General Petraeus testifies in April, the emphasis should be on how do we sustain the gains that we have made, not on how fast we should withdraw. Of course, we will withdraw our forces eventually, as we should. But it must be based on the conditions on the ground. That is a powerful lesson that we should not relearn. It is safe to assume that we would reduce our forces further in 09, but equally important, if we meter this right, violence and casualties will continue to go down significantly. And in my view, Iraq will be much less of a concern to the American people as a result of that. Number 2, continue the current military strategy, and this is important, of protecting the people. We cannot pull away from them, because if we encourage the extremists, if we do, we're going to encourage the extremists, both Sunni and Shia, and the criminals to escalate the level of violence. 3, continue to grow, develop, and build the Iraqi security forces. The Army will double in size. 100,000 have been added this year, and our training teams are crucial to their success. The National Police, who I recommended to General Petraeus last year be disbanded, are actually finally making some progress. And I think General Petraeus will provide evidence of that when he comes in April. General Hussein, who's in charge, is a tough, competent leader. He's fired every brigade commander, all 9 of them, and 17 of the 27 battalion commanders. 4 or 5 of those brigades are finally starting to show some progress and get rid of the sectarianism and also show some competence, much to all of our surprise, and that's good news. Number 4, transition control to the Iraqis as they demonstrate a capacity to be successful. I mean, that's self-evident. But it's already happening in the South. It's already happening in the North. In 08, we will do that in Anbar province, and we will do it in certain areas in Baghdad. And obviously, as those conditions become available in other places, that transition to control will continue. Number 5, encourage the government of Iraq to accept more of the concerned local citizens group into the security forces after they are properly vetted. They number now a staggering 70,000, which is very significant, but they can do more in terms of accepting more. Number 6, continue to assist the government of Iraq to pass the remainder of the legislative benchmarks. Recognize while the benchmarks are important, they are only the first steps for the Iraqis in resolving their differences through the political process versus violence. To those who say we must reduce our forces immediately to force the Iraqis to complete the political response, to complete the political process, my response is that that template is harmful and does not fit the reality in Iraq. Quite the contrary. Those who know the key leaders in Iraq believe with conviction that it is our presence that has helped the Iraqis to move this political process. Immediate withdrawal actually caters to their fears and paranoia, that they will be left to deal with the extremists themselves. It forces them to do the opposite of what we are intended. Instead of political process and progress, they will pull back from that. And that impact will be very significant. What they will do is pull back and develop a bunker mentality to defend themselves. It invites a return to sectarian violence, extremism, and civil war. Number 7, assist the Iraqis in providing provincial elections in 08 and the general election, which is planned for in 09. Out of that, a much stronger political system, in my view, is on the way, and we have to hold them to it. Number 8, Iraq is improving economically. While unemployment is much too high, staggeringly too high, it is improving. Utilities are improving. Microloans for small businesses are on the rise. The Iraqi currency, much to everyone's surprise, is in pretty good shape. And the government has a budget. And this legislative body should be aware of how tough it is to get a budget out. It's no small task for them, and they've succeeded. And of course, much more is needed. As the security situation improves, we must encourage foreign investment and free trade. And number 9, we must enter into a long-term security relationship with Iraq. The groundwork for this has already begun. First, we must resolve the internal security situation we are facing. Then transition the Iraqi security forces to external defense. This will involve a much reduced force on our part and will be executed initially, in my view, with much less casualties and eventually with no casualties because Iraq will be stable. And 10, more must be done to look at Iraq regionally with its neighbors, who can assist with the further growth and development of Iraq. A stable Iraq is in everyone's interest in the region, to include Syria and Iran. So in conclusion, yes, I am hopeful about the future in Iraq. We have many challenges to be sure. The future is not certain. There'll be frustrations there, to be sure, as well. But we have a very real opportunity to succeed in achieving a stable government in Iraq, capable of protecting its people and providing a quality of life experience for the Iraqi people. This could only be accomplished with the generosity and sacrifice of the American people, the courage and sacrifice of the Iraqis, and the truly magnificent selfless service and sacrifice by our troops and their families. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
General McCaffrey.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me thank you and the members of your committee for the opportunity to be here. I'm delighted to join this panel. Dr. John Hamre and General Keane and I have worked together for years. I have tremendous respect for them, and I've read a lot of Chris Kojm's work to boot. I provide each member of the committee a report from my Iraq visit. I just got back prior to Christmas, as is my custom. I spent about a week there. I got throughout much of the country. I spent most of my time focused at lower level, province and below, talking to both Iraqi police, military, and U.S. military leadership. And perhaps those observations, and also an accompanying Wall Street Journal op-ed that tries to summarize the findings will be helpful to you. Let me, if I can, lay down some general themes, and I look forward to responding to your own interests. Number one, it's clear to me that the situation in Iraq has changed like night and day. And so the debate has to move forward and not talk about whether that's true or not, but instead understand what are the plausible explanations to why that change has occurred, and therefore are they sustainable, or what will happen as we withdraw in the coming years. But I think any objective measure, principally measures of violence, kidnappings, murders, attacks on U.S. forces, attacks on Iraqi forces, you name it, the situation is remarkable. I spent a day with an infantry brigade in Baghdad that during the so-called surge into the city, 6 million Arab people, took 80 killed, 600 wounded, regaining control of their piece of ground. The day I was in Baghdad, in that entire city, there were 2 violent incidents that day. I rode around, spent a day in Ramadi, which was a constant gunfire, 24 hours a day. And the last visit, and this time around, there were no violent incidents in Anbar province the day I was out with the Marines and the Army forces. So the situation changed. That's not to imply that there aren't still just under 3,000 attacks per month still against coalition allied or forces or civilians. There's still a civil war going on, but it is one changed environment. Second observation, I think the political dynamics are dramatically changed, not clear we understand it, and that is the principal reason behind much of the change. It's not to deny the courage, the excellence of U.S. and Iraqi security forces, but it's clear as you look at the Sunnis, I think the bottom line to me was they just woke up, they said, my God, these people are leaving, we'll be left, a minority of the population, 16–20% of Iraq, to the mercies of the people we cruelly exploited for the last 3 decades. They rushed to join the police, the army. Ba'athist 2-star intel generals became province police chiefs in Anbar. So the Sunnis got scared and started to engage. The spin-off of that was these concerned local citizens who are primarily Sunni, but it's now being extended to Shia areas south of Baghdad. So suddenly you got 60,000, 70,000 people with AKs guarding their neighborhood, their community. The Kurdish situation in the north, I think the Turkish threat to them may have been helpful, where they suddenly got reminded of the notion better to be part of an Iraq federation, an Iraqi state, than to be a target for the powerful Turkish military. And then finally the Shia, for a variety of reasons. Again, I'm not sure we totally understand it. It's clear that the ceasefire, which the generating factor was the humiliation of Mr. Sadr and his forces during their outrage against Shia pilgrims in the south. But nonetheless, in his personal fear of probably being killed by U.S. Special Ops or captured, there is a ceasefire. To some extent it's holding, and so the level of violence went down. The political dynamics are quite different. AQI, this is a strong statement, one the military is not willing to make. U.S. Special Operations Forces, Stan McChrystal and JSOC, have tactically defeated AQI in Baghdad and Anbar province. They are killing them faster than they can generate leadership. It's the first time in the history of warfare I've seen that happen. It's a combination of unbelievable intelligence, forensic police investigation, tremendous intel input from the Iraqis, and some of the most ferociously talented special ops people we've ever produced. That's not to say they can't respond with an outrage or that they're operationally or strategically no longer a factor. They've moved up into Diyala, they moved up around Mosul, they're in the deserts out in the western frontier. They're still there, but tactically it has been appalling to them what we did to them. The State Department dialogue has changed the nature of the situation. There is an ongoing, Dr. Rice has got an ongoing outrage about the Iranians and the Syrians. To some extent, it may be that they're responding. It may be that there's less active Iranian support for Shia attacks on U.S. forces. Clearly, the number of border crossers has gone down dramatically, and of the ones who are crossing the border, the overwhelming majority are dead within 4 weeks, either because they ineffectually, in general, have conducted suicide attacks or they've been policed up by Iraqi security forces or U.S. military forces. And then finally, I think Jordan, Saudi, Turkey now being engaged, now more supportive toward the general goal of not having us withdraw, leaving chaos in Iraq. Bottom line, we still got problems. Maliki government is largely dysfunctional. There is reason to believe provincial, district, municipal government is starting to become connected. The Army and the police have been re-energized. The police, who are still modestly corrupt, ineffectual, badly equipped, and not reliable, nonetheless, there's, I think, 8 of 9 new brigade commanders, a massive retraining program, new equipment showing up, and a lot of U.S. military mentorship. Not to be discounted, the nature of the leadership on the ground. General Dave Petraeus and Ambassador Ryan Crocker, the two of them have, and I would agree totally with General Keane's comments, it wasn't 5 additional brigades to get to 21 for 5 months. It was a drastically different tactical application of counterinsurgency tactics, combined with smart diplomacy. In the background, the new Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates, I think has changed the climate to one of pragmatism and focus on outcomes. Thank God we have him in the last year of this administration in charge of trying to direct the interagency debate. We got some other problems. U.S. Army can't sustain the current strategy. Our manpower is inadequate. Article 1 of the Constitution, that is the Congress's job to raise and support an Army and Navy and provide for national defense. Manpower is off. The quality of recruiting and retention is a huge challenge to us. I think 10% of the soldiers coming into the Army shouldn't be in uniform. We do that too long, we'll regret it. They'll become sergeants. We're losing our hotshot young officers and mid-career NCOs in too high a number. Our equipment is broken, and the Army and the Marine Corps and Special Ops are under-resourced. Finally, and I provided you one other handout, I would be remiss in not reminding all of us that a $12 billion a month campaign that's run 34,000 killed and wounded, that's largely not supported by the American people, has affected one other aspect of national defense, our technological modernization, in particular of global air power. And, you know, it's hard for us to say this in public. We don't want to create and reset a battle force that's capable of fighting Iraq better minus Mr. Rumsfeld. Instead, we want to look out 15 years and say, what are the new challenges and how do we deter mischief on the Pacific Rim with a world-class air and naval force to prevent war in the next generation. And I think we have sadly misjudged this and not done our job in that area. Mr. Chairman, again, I thank you and your committee members for what you have done to sustain a strong national defense, and I look forward to responding to your questions.
Thank you, General McCaffrey. We've been joined by the chairman of the committee, Chairman Ike Skelton from Missouri. Mr. Chairman, do you want to say anything?
Except you have a very distinguished panel.
I think that we had better do our recess now for the series of votes that we have, Mr. Kojm. Otherwise, you're going to see members impatiently looking at their clock and not giving the time you need. This is a longer break than we would like it to be. I think we'll probably be close to 40 to 45 minutes. I apologize for that. It's just the nature of the game. The staff will be glad to help you with anything you might need in terms of a private room or phones or fresh ice, water, whatever you need. We'll be in recess.
Nature of democracy.